what the agenda of the next 45 minutes is to be like really honest. It sucked on so many levels. So yeah, let's just be honest about the year that we had, about the challenges we had to face, and in general, how we all had to change and adapt to the situation. I'm so glad that for this panel, we have some very, very amazing, talented people. But all of those people are also really warm and genuine. Like, I've had the privilege of talking to them one on one, and I can assure you, folks, that they're some of the warmest and kindest people you will come across. So, I would definitely say we are in luck today that we have the chance to talk to them one on one, as well as ask all the questions that we have on the year that we've had and also the coming years. So without further ado, I would like to welcome all our panel speakers and have them on board. Okay, so I see Lara, Cax, uh, is Gianluca around? Joby, do we want to like ping him quickly, maybe?
Yeah, I think he might be just running a little late. Let me just ping him 2 seconds.
Okay, cool. While we wait for him, maybe we can start with like a round of introductions, and maybe Lara, you could go first.
Sure. Hi guys, I'm Lara. I'm the head of product design at Bumble. I've been at Bumble for I think a year and 2 months now, and our team has grown a lot in the last year. So that has been my main job, beyond shipping some of the things that you've seen if you're on Bumble. If you're looking for love, maybe you're not. And yeah, and you know, kind of trying to grow a design culture as well. That's me. And before that, I worked in a few startups, and I think my main drive has always been to find a kind of mission-driven company, and that's what I found at Bumble.
Hi everybody, my name is Cax. I work as a product lead in Adventa for a domain called Trust and Safety. I am based off in Barcelona. I moved to Barcelona 5 years ago, and I've been with Adventa ever since. But I've also shifted different teams in Adventa. I think I've had two or three product teams since I joined. Um, After work, when there is time and not a lot of meetings filling my calendar, I also do product mentorship for new product managers, and I also have a community for women called Career Hacking for Women.
Amazing. Thank you, Cax. And last but not the least, we have Carolyn with us today. Carolyn, do you want to go next?
Hello, good evening. Yeah, my name is Kylie Diebert. I'm actually German, but I'm based in Barcelona since 5 years already, and I don't feel like going back soon. I'm a front-end engineer, and I work for Intent HQ here in Barcelona, although the main office is actually in London. Yeah, I've also created together with a friend like a women in tech coding meetup, which basically gives like introductory workshops for people that want to get into coding, which is called Code Bar, which is pretty amazing. And that's how I met a lot of people from the community. And that's also what made me get excited about being compassionate and about mentorship.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. So nice to have you all. I think Gianluca must have gotten caught up somewhere. Well, it's 2020, so let's just go with the flow like we went throughout the year. And the upside is then now it becomes like a panel of women, like we didn't plan this, who are all very strong, committed, and really good mentors. So yeah, that's the upside, and we just go with it. And hopefully Gianluca joins somewhere in the between. Okay, so I'm going to start with some of the questions that I already have for all of you. What I've tried is I've divided into three sections. So one is like empathy, another one is diversity, and the third part is careers. Like all those who are on the call, feel free to drop your questions on the chat here or on the Slack, or even if you like want to turn on your video and just ask them, feel free, because we are a small group. We have this liberty, thankfully. So let's just get started. And I'm gonna start with you, Lara, again. And the question is that in these times when people have like heightened emotional responses, designing for a dating app definitely gets more complex than it already is. So can you talk about like a few examples where you and your team had to take extra care to design features that make people feel that they really belong?
Sure, that's a really good question. I think like there's two scenarios that I think like I want to talk about. The first one is in general, and the second one is COVID. I think in general, this year has been really important for the entire company to push for kind of more action-based discussions around diversity, equity, inclusivity, belonging in general. I think in the past, Bumble has done a really good job of kind of putting us out there as a brand that has a point of view, but we are at the end of the day a product and not just a brand. So having things in the product that reflect that are really, really important. So this year we broke into kind of more squads or pods, depending on like what kind of methodology you follow. And one of the things that we decided to prioritize as a company was safety. So user safety became its own little unit with resource, with budget and everything. So there was no kind of excuse to ignore this very important question around online dating, also real life dating. And that was one of the things that we did, I think, that had a really strong impact. So one of the features that I mentioned on the talk that I gave was a safety feature. And we've done a lot more. And I think the other thing is we kind of reframed a lot of the questions that we asked around dating in general from kind of the core or target audience that we had in our heads, which didn't really have a face, but he ended up, because of quantity, because of majority, looking very specifically like one type of person. And we wanted to change that conversation. So not just design, but everyone, research, product, started to look into our underserved audiences. So instead of like researching around how people date in general, we also did separate research to understand how the LGBTQ community dated in our app, how Black women especially dated in our app, and all the challenges that they faced that other people didn't face. And that was really eye-opening for everyone, but especially for designers. I think it was a good opportunity to think about the kind of risk that we run into by just doing our jobs. We don't really think about responsibility when we're designers. We think about kind of creativity, but product designers have a really huge responsibility. And that's something that I always say, like leadership in design should be like politicians. They should be thinking about people versus a screen. And I think that was a very positive thing that happened. Was it kind of reframed the entire team to start thinking about those very hard questions. And since then, we started to kind of maybe naturally introduce way more of that conversation into everything we do, but also to really talk about specific things that we want to do for each of these things that we identified. So there's a lot of, for example, next year I think will be even more important because COVID kind of derailed some of these efforts because of just how how different dating is in general. But next year will be really big in us kind of releasing some of that work and also evolving some of that thinking to like even more things. But if you want something that is live right now, I think the kind of the way our algorithm works is always evolving. And I think one very important thing is that we brought up this conversation so much that all the teams are taking that into consideration and kind of improving that. Some other things is we started to kind of tailor some of our main screens in terms of language, to make the language in the whole app more gender neutral. I think dating has a really big problem of like gendered conversations. And we wanted the app to be way more inclusive. So we kind of did an overhaul of the pronouns and everything that we use. And that's a really small change. But when you go into the app and you're a non-binary user and you see that, you know, it's not putting you in a box, it kind of gives you a different perspective and you feel welcome. And we also did kind of expand the gender selector that we have and kind of tailored that towards giving it a positive experience for every person, not just people who fall into the binary. And there are kind of a lot of actions that, you know, we did throughout the year. And the other COVID kind of went through the same. And we ended up really kind of having to relearn how people date. So we expanded a lot of our knowledge on virtual online dating, about, you know, people getting to see each other before they get to know each other, and how that affects how people really think about other people. And because of that, we kind of had to change all our roadmaps and kind of rethink a lot of the feature ideas that we had and all the projects that we had, to really focus around, okay, how can we get people to, in this weird time, to really get to know each other in a meaningful way versus a superficial way. And that ended up evolving into something that became like a more expanded mission for the whole company. So I'm really proud of the fact that, you know, everyone in the team did the exercise. It wasn't just design, research, everyone. And he ended up paying off really nicely, and is now kind of central to Bumble. Yeah, I hope I have answered the question.
Yes, like you gave a lot of insights on the overall working of the product and like how it had to cope up with the changing times, and also like the fact that how you pointed out that like products need to have like a strong brand as well, especially in the year 2020, when we had like so many occasions, be it like Black Lives Matter or like US elections. For a product to have a strong brand presence and take a side, that had to come off very strongly, and that definitely had an impact on the engagement. Cax, coming to you, like along the same lines, you're a product lead yourself. Do you want to add like a line or two, or your thoughts on products having a strong brand voice as well?
Wow, that's a loaded. This is a loaded topic. It's probably worth a talk in itself. I think for Adevinta, for example, there's a lot of work that we've done, especially this year, in being very vocal about certain things, about the way that we take care of our employees. But more than having a strong brand voice, I think one of the things that is important for a company to focus on is actually getting feedback as well, because there is no brand voice if you don't know what exactly your people are saying. So that's one of the things that I've seen Adevinta do a lot of this year, especially with COVID coming in, a lot of people having concerns about working remotely, the I don't know, like screens and tables, are they available? Can we work from somewhere? And how does that impact the work? And how does this impact the team, our mental health, having a lot of meetings in our calendars, etc., etc. That has really been the center of all of our conversations in Adevinta. And as a bonus, if there is something really worth sharing, then that came out as a brand voice, and that's being shared in relevant channels. Like this one, I can talk about it because that feedback has happened, because that conversation has happened internally.
Cool. Thank you, Cax, for the answer. So I saw that Gianluca just joined. Hi, Gianluca. Nice to have you here. Oh, Joey, can you unmute him, please?
Hello, everyone, and sorry for being a little bit late. Actually, working on a startup, as many of us knows, is a little bit hectic. So, sorry about that, and nothing. Thank you for the invitation, Chhavi.
No worries, Gianluca. No worries. We'll give you a moment to catch your breath while we talk to Caroline, and then I'll come to you.
Perfect.
Cool. So, Caroline, in your talk, you have talked about compassion in tech. Can you talk about like a few products who have shown compassion and evolved with the needs of the current time?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about the product that I'm currently working on. Basically, what we do in my company is we analyze client data and we try to find patterns in it. And one thing we introduced recently is that we allow tagging private data to make sure we respect people's privacy, which is super important. But in general, I think one product is kind of the sum of all of its processes that leads to the completion of that product. And that's why I think it's also important how the team works together compassionately on a daily basis and during the whole time of the creation. And yeah, that's why I think, to be honest, we did a really good job coming closer together as a team, checking in on each other even more, communicating in a more peaceful, non-judgmental way to make sure people get stuff done, although maybe they are suffering from anxieties or maybe they have a lot of other things on their plate, like childcare. Yeah, I think that also really matters to create a good product, how people collaborate in a new and fantastic way.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks, Carolyn. And Gianluca, now coming closer to talking about compassion. Like in these times when like we can't have face-to-face meetings, and definitely the on-site interviews that we had for like the whole day, those are all not possible. So, and also like people are going through like different situations while they're interviewing for different positions. So like how have recruitment practices evolved with the current times to keep up with it?
Really good question. I think many of the processes, depending of them, remain the same as what it had inside. What it has changed is the way that we do them. As you say, many of the on-site interviews are not possible. So basically, it's adapting to the situation, right? Being empathetic and understanding what's happening worldwide and everywhere that we are looking for talent. So basically, with this, we have been, for example, at Globo going remote until the COVID situation stops, giving flexibility to employees. Also, we added, for example, unlimited vacations to build our culture based on trust, with the same objective. But at the end, the empathy that people must feel during these times is key, and that's what we're doing, right? Also, a lot of async communication and over communication, very important, that people feel support, wellness programs, mental health programs also inside, and of course, again, remote onboarding. So again, I think the process remains basically sometimes the same in terms of what we're looking for, but how we do it and what are we looking now and how we understand every situation has changed.
Yeah, I think that really sums up with how most of us are like dealing with this situation. Thank you, Gianluca, for that answer. So that ends section 1 from my side. I see we have a question for Lara. Meanwhile, if any of you have any other questions for empathy and compassion in your team, please put it in the chat box. So Lara, a question for you. The question is, which part of the design process is the right part to focus on belonging? We as a design team from K15T Software wondering how the work is distributed among 8 or more designers in a design team.
I think it definitely depends on the maturity of the team. The more influence you have, obviously, the more kind of intrinsic that is to the work that you do. And the more you're kind of seen as a service, the more you have to kind of push for things to happen. So if you have a team of 8 people or more, let's say, and you kind of work in a very embedded collaborative way with other stakeholders, what I suggest is to definitely bring it as early as possible. And the earlier you can, the more mature that means your process is. So it's a good kind of way to see a thermometer to see like how well you're doing in terms of having a design-led culture. If you, for example, have the chance to participate in planning for roadmap, that means that you're actively shaping the product. So if your team or leadership in design is part of that conversation, that's really good. And that's the right moment to bring up those questions. I definitely think at some point as you are scoping the solution, that's where like it definitely needs to exist. So if you cannot bring it forward, you know, when you are planning a roadmap and say, guys, what can we do here? What can we, what kind of research can we do to identify problems in these areas? What can we do to identify misuse? You should definitely do that within your domain when it's time to scope a solution. So one way, I'll give you 2 examples. So when you're doing discovery, a good way is to have a separate meeting during the discovery process, during the planning process, where you talk about possible risk or misuse. And that's a way to identify, you know, bias in the stuff that you're designing, and kind of get other people in the same mindset. So instead of going to the design team and talking about this, do a cross-disciplinary workshop where the topic is, okay, what are the risks involved in this financial, technical, social, you know, economic, etc. And you will uncover a lot of these questions and people will get in the right mindset. And if you don't have that maturity and you don't have the kind of cross-disciplinary influence, you should be doing that when you design with your team. So sit with the other designers and ask those questions. The important thing is like the earlier in the process, the better. If you only think about those things when it's time to like validate a solution or A/B test a solution, you probably will already have a bad impact, and it's really hard to undo things that have been released. Look at Facebook, for example. You know, the snowball effect that happened on Facebook is now impossible to undo because all the consequences are already there. So it's better to identify early. Yeah.
Thanks, Lara. I hope, EC, that answers your question. And if you have follow-up questions, do type them here or on the Slack channel. Okay, so moving on to the next part, I'm going to focus more on careers and job opportunities because I see some questions about that here. First one is for you, Cax, which is, you talked about in your talk that how all of your team pitched in, irrespective of their conventional job description, like, and then at the end of the day, if it was about helping team, they just went ahead and did it, you know? So how do you ensure that while you're hiring or while you're talking to prospective candidates, that unconventional definitions of the role within your team is conveyed or is communicated in a way so that the expectations are set right?
I think there are different parts to this. For one is the posting, for example, the listing for the job itself. And one of the things that I'm really proud of when it comes to Adiventa and the way that we do it is that our culture is very visible in our job offers and in the way that we communicate everywhere, in our posts, in our site, our company culture of say it as it is, win together, lose together. All of those values are very visible. So when you come into the mindset of I'm going to apply for this role in this company, there is already that expectation that you're part of an organization, and if the organization's value is win together, lose together, there is some set of expectations around that. There is also the part of being very clear in the job descriptions about what is your team's or the team that you're going to come into, what is that team's mission, and having a clear conversation around that and putting focus on it more than, for example, requirements, which at the end of the day, requirements are more of a nice to have, but this is a personal opinion. But the responsibilities and the mission of the team need to go together as well. And then there's also the interview process and being transparent about how your team works, what is the kind of culture you have in your team. For example, in our organization, we have a part of the interview process called the culture fit interview, which is pretty much a chance for the candidate to interview us as well and ask about how we do stuff, how we work, how we collaborate, and we bring in people from the team into this conversation so we can talk about our processes, everybody's responsibility, everybody's mission, and how they're contributing to the end goal. And there's probably more to it than that. It's probably not as simple as I'm imagining it in my head, but I think it's all about being transparent on the expectations from the people, from a company point of view and also from a team point of view.
Thanks, Gags. Thanks for the answer. And I think there's a follow-up question which we can quickly cover since we are on this topic, which is if everyone contributes things that are out of their expertise zone, how do you or should you set boundaries between the roles of the team members?
This is something that we're still trying to define. We're all still testing new processes in our team. But again, at the end of the day, we work towards a goal. And how to contribute to that goal can be fluid. If somebody needs to code, somebody needs to write, somebody needs to write copies, or design, that's all that matters. Who can do it at that point is something that we're trying to keep as fluid as possible. Who has that capability? I've been doing user interviews, for example, because our UXer is full. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it's not about gatekeeping that responsibility. It's about making sure that it gets done so that you achieve your goal. So we're not, I think in our team as well, we're not so concerned about setting those boundaries. We're more concerned about achieving the goal that we have set for ourselves in that quarter. What I do acknowledge though that this might be different per team, different per organization, wherein some teams might be more have more preference on like really clear boundaries, and that could be the personality of the team. For us, it's not. So it's really about defining what is important for your team, how to cater to the personalities around it as well, and what kind of culture you want to build as well.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question. It's also a lot to unpack.
Yes, thank you so much. EC, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to tag Gags and ask them. So the next one, I'm going to ask both Gianluca and Lara because I think both of them will have good insights on this one. This is from Augustine. The question is, the job offers for all roles have reduced last year, but junior positions seem to have disappeared completely. In your opinion, when are they coming back? Gianluca, would you like to go first?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to share some thoughts. Basically, it all depends on the economies. Again, each company has a budget, and founders and people that not just founders, but the board of directors are looking for revenues, right? Sorry if you hear a knock, but they are making some changes here. So basically, depends on the economy. If the economy recovers faster, that means that companies will have better chances of allocate this money, and therefore will be able to create more junior positions to help with work. Now, each economy behaves different, right? For example, Spain is a services, is a cash economy that works different than, for example, USA or other economies. So given if you watch, of course, the videos that we made all together, here we talked about that the founders and VCs from, actually there were some of them, they believe that the economies are going to start recovering to normal basis in Q2, Q3 2022. So we still have some of this. And to add to this, I will say there are still some junior positions, but right now you have 5 or 10 times more competition. So the idea is to stand out and to be different, right? To not just do the normal application and so on, and many more. But these are my 2 main ideas. Of course, I would like to hear more from Lara.
Thanks. I think one thing that is important to consider, at least in design, is that most companies right now, they either had to let people go or they froze hiring. And like Gianluca said, a lot of this has to do with the economy. So if you think about any company that has a supply chain, which Bumble luckily doesn't, so we were kind of in luck, we didn't have to let people go, but a lot of company had to. Anything that has a supply chain has been affected. And most companies do have a supply chain, unless that means kind of they rely on the real world, either for distribution or for kind of the the end user to use something like Airbnb needs houses and things like that. Because of that, these companies will hire slowly. They had to let people go, and usually the people who go first are the least experienced because they need more support. So they need, if you imagine, for kind of every person that goes, that is a manager, 10 people are left without support. And if you think about a junior role, that those people need a lot more support. Other thing that companies are doing is focusing a lot more on quick execution right now because of COVID. Everything is changing every 2 months, so you need to execute fast, and for that you hire senior people because they need less support. So all of that is going to take a long time to be fixed. And I do think the market's going to stay like that, even if the economy kind of recovers a bit, because design culture is something that when you kind of pull it back a little and it gets a little worse, it's really hard to get back to where you were quick. So if the company is relying less and has less support for juniors, the tendency is to stay that way until, you know, kind of something changes and a catalyst happens. So even if the economy improves, the teams will probably stay in execution mode for a little longer. But another good thing is that because of the economy, it will kind of self-regulate a little bit because the schools are getting a lot less people. So in a few years, it will kind of level down. So it'll be a few years that'll be weird, but then it will end up being a little worse, obviously, for everyone because, you know, the economy was deeply affected. But you have less people graduating every 6 months. So the kind of market, you will start to find more places, and it will improve a little bit. But it will be a very tough journey. My advice is to kind of diversify what you're looking for. Don't go for the same companies. Look for smaller companies that, you know, will take a chance on you. Move if you can. Look in other countries in the EU. If you can't for personal reasons or financial reasons, then kind of try to find something local that is stable, because you can also join a company that has roles open, but it's not very stable and won't be stable for the next year and a half, and you might end up losing that job. So try to think about long-term stability as well.
Can I add something to that? What I also noticed as a trend, and I super agree with what Lara mentioned about diversifying. Look at other industries as well. That's not your norm because they're probably looking for designers one way or another. Maybe it's not in tech, but for example, health, which is booming, are probably needing designers one way or another. Also, some companies are switching to remote work. So companies who wouldn't be normally in your radar because they're in a different continent could probably be an option now. And also the hustle culture is becoming stronger in these times, as in people are becoming more entrepreneurial in terms of they're starting their own small businesses from their homes, and probably those people will need design help as well. So that could be like small little things that could be done to find those design opportunities.
Thank you so much for answering that really tricky question with like full frankness and honesty. Carolyn, I want to get this to you because you've transitioned from a designer to developer. And in these times, like we've seen a lot of people transition out of roles, out of necessity, or like, you know, after periods of thinking. So what are some tips that you have for like how Lara and Cax also mentioned for diversifying your options and also for making those transitions if and when needed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you mentioned, my experience specifically transitioning from design to a developer role, and that's why I can give good advice for this specific case, I think. It definitely took me a year or two to get stable in a new role. And one thing that has been of big help for me was definitely mentorship. When looking for new roles, I tried to make sure that the companies will actually have the potential to be able to mentor me. And also before even getting my first jobs in engineering, I was writing emails to tons of companies that were interesting for me to find out if maybe they would like to help me in the learning process. I was still working as a designer, but I went to offices of companies to work on my own exercises, basically, and let them give me advice when I had questions, when I was stuck. Because especially when learning how to code, you get stuck all the time and it's very frustrating. And you need somebody that will tap your shoulder and say, it's going to be fine, you'll figure it out at some point. It's really important. Otherwise, I think it can easily happen that you give up on the way. And then one other thing I noticed is that in the beginning, when I was still a designer wanting to go to engineering, I bought a lot of books about software engineering, and I got them shipped to my house, and I started reading them, and I was very excited, and I thought, wow, very interesting how these people do it. And then I sat down in front of my code editor and I tried to code. But that's not how it works. You don't read a book and then you start coding. You have to do, basically you have to play around a lot and experiment and play with code all the time. Reading books about it is amazing on the side, but the main thing is to get your hands dirty and to practice a lot and to do exercises. That's one thing I wasn't so aware of in the beginning, or maybe I was also afraid to code because I didn't want to notice how I'm failing. But it's very important to fail and suffer and struggle with it a lot. Yeah, that's what I can give as advice. And also go a lot to meetups. There's a lot of amazing meetups for people to learn how to code, also in Barcelona. And a lot of them are also happening online now. Yeah.
Thank you, Caroline, for giving an insight that how it's not that easy, but if you keep going, you can. So just a time check, we have 10 more minutes. I'm gonna ask the question that Rory has to our panel. But meanwhile, if you have any questions, just put it down here. Now's the time to get them answered. Feel free to put it down and I'll pick it up. So Rory's question is, and any of our panel member, please feel free to pick this up, is speaking of jobs, Reddit and Gumroad announced that they will offer San Francisco wages to anyone wherever in the world they are. Do you think people in traditionally lower wage countries will be able to take advantage of this?
I can give you my honest answer. Yes and no. I always find it funny when companies say, oh yeah, we're gonna hire anywhere in the world, then we're gonna pay you, I don't know, $200,000 a year. The reality is that those companies have very strict hiring processes. And at the end of the day, they want you to come from Facebook or Dropbox. And where are those companies? Silicon Valley. So it's easy to say you're gonna hire anywhere, but then you hire from the same places over and over again. So without a diversity kind of action-based diversity program to break those barriers and look at potential instead of looking at experience, and kind of taking more than 2 seconds to look at a portfolio, which is what hiring managers usually spend, that won't change. So I would say yes, apply and make sure that you're applying with confidence and with the right work. Read as much as you can about it online. Don't do the things that they say not to do when you apply. Give you your all. But there's a big chance that you're going to have to start a little smaller, maybe not with San Francisco salaries, but a San Francisco company that will put you on the map for those bigger companies. And then eventually you kind of break the barrier.
So frank. Thank you. Thank you, Lara. Gianluca, Caroline, any thoughts to add to that?
I think Lara mentioned it very clearly at the end. It's about the hiring bars that these companies have. Of course, if we talk about the economy and how other people can benefit from it, you can. But as Lara said, you have to be ready for what it's there. And as she said also, I will recommend the same. Point for a smaller San Francisco company and then move towards a big one, or prepare very well and do so. But this is something that we're already seeing. We're hiring also from the Valley and from Europe, For example, people from, I don't know, Romania, really good engineers from Romania are already working on Silicon Valley, but with wages of I give that example because we have that example very soon, but it's happening already. So yes, I believe people can feel benefited with it and be benefited with it. But
I do have a similar but kind of different perspective around this. As somebody who was shipped from Philippines to Barcelona, there are different angles as well to look at. If ever it does happen, even if they do say we're gonna pay you San Francisco salary, do your research. Make sure they're really going to do that, because there is a huge gap between what you expect in your brain because of what you're used to and what's the reality of the companies that you're going into. So you don't want to be that person who's not necessarily undervaluing yourself, but because of a lack of research on your part, you're not aware that you could have asked for this instead of this. So that's one. And the second one is be creative around your job search as well, or your application. So now that the competition is becoming very, very stiff, the usual process of submitting your CV via LinkedIn, via email, going through different job sites, etc. There's a lot of people there. You're fighting against volume. So work as well on your own brand. Work on your personal brand, as in make yourself desirable as an employee. Make yourself, or as a professional, make known your strengths, make known your skills, your achievements, so that you can also attract these companies the other way around. Instead of you going to them, they could be going to you as well. But that takes longer work and a lot more dedication than writing CVs and sending them to individual companies.
Yeah. And now, since we're talking about being shipped around, I think this is one thing that personally I and some of the people I know on the call would be really interested. Like, how is the sentiment around overseas hiring? Like, I could start with Gianluca because he's towards the right on my screen. But the idea is that how is the sentiment in Europe, especially Spain, about overseas hiring? And then we can like have all the speakers answer it.
Again, this is a very good question. Overseas hiring is more open for again, high qualified roles. So we are talking about roles that earn in Spain 50K or more, that have 4 or 5 years of experience, and so these give more facilities for the overseas hiring. For other roles that maybe we are not, or we were not there in that phase, it's a little bit harder. But for corporate companies, and the government has certain requirements, and these are the requirements. So this is the first line. About that, it depends, right? So there are companies that are fully remote. So you also need to check the taxes of each of the countries. Where is your local entity? How you're managing those things, similar to what Kak said before. And it's happening. Glovo, for example, has around 40% of the engineering team that has come from abroad. So it's happening. Many companies are doing so, but again, it depends on each country and the regulations that each country has within your country and so on.
Yeah, Caroline, would you like to add, being an expat yourself, how do you see the sentiment around that?
I don't really know how many overseas hires there were in my company. What I know is that also through the year, we turned more into a remote company, like a lot of companies, especially tech companies. And we are more open to remote hires. That's what I know.
Okay. Cax and Lara.
Adevinta is pretty, or it has always been pretty good when it comes to hiring outside of Europe, case in point me. But we've also hired from different continents, like from Africa, from South America. But similar to what Gianluca said, it's a higher tier in terms of experience and expectations, because of country regulations, for example. In our offices in the Nordics, it's the same. It depends on the regulations that are available in Sweden and in Norway. So I would say yes, it's possible. There's a bit of barrier to get there, but that's really not the company's fault, and it's more of what is available to them because of laws. But they're like work towards it. Some friends that I know of went through another route of doing masters first, and once they're in that country, then they started applying for the role because they're already there. The others went from one country to another, so they went to a country that has a more generous regulations, and then from there, because probably that country has a better relationship with their real target country, that's another path. But it's also about positioning yourself well. Are you really in that position wherein the company super wants you and will fight for you? That is also a good path to be in.
Thanks, Gax. Lara, do you want to add
I
something?
just want to add, I mean, I agree with everything that was said. I think there are two main ways, like because of COVID, that you can do it. You can, yes, go move to that country, relocate, which is one thing, or you can find companies that can hire remote anywhere. A lot of these companies, especially smaller companies, get away with hiring people from anywhere via like contracting. Each country has its own laws around contracting, so I would get to know yours if you plan on doing that, but they're usually way more relaxed because you're kind of a company that your company is hiring, so it's usually way easier, but you won't enjoy the benefits, obviously, of your job. If you want to kind of relocate, then you definitely need to know if that company can sponsor you. I would advise against just applying to all the companies. I would research. Most countries, the company has to be over a certain threshold in terms of like kind of revenue, number of people, etc., to be an entity that can sponsor. I know that's true for Bumble in the UK. For example, we just opened a office in Barcelona, but because it's super new, we still can only hire people who have the right to work in Barcelona, unfortunately. But if you want to relocate to London, then you can relocate you to London. So like there are these intricacies, and I would definitely research the companies that you want to work for and understand like how they can help you, if they can help you at all. And I would talk to people who've done the same from your country. You know, if you know anyone, like they're the best people to give you advice.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We're right on time. Thank you so much to all the people who came. I know virtual events like are the downsides of 2020. We miss being in the same room and just walking up to the people and talking to them. So thank you so much for making the time.